So last lesson we looked at if statements. So for example, if I had a variable, I could check if x is equal to 3, and if it was, then I could write some code that would happen. And then we also said, well, you could also check if x was not equal to 3. So this means equals, checking if something is equals. This means checking if something does not equal. And you could write some code here. So this code would work completely fine, except it's a bit redundant, or there's an easier way to do it. If you have a situation where you want code to happen one way or another, so for example, if I wanted to check if x is equal to 3 and I wanted to perform some code, but if x was not equal to 3, and I still wanted to perform something to maybe tell the user that, you know what, this ain't right, this is false, sure, I could write my condition such as x does not equal 3. Or you could just pair your if statement with an else statement. And the beauty of this is in the simplicity. If x is equal to 3, this code will happen. Else, this code will happen. So you get a situation where it's one or the other. If x is equal to 3, this will happen. If this isn't true, whatever is in your else statement will happen. So functionally, it works the exact same way as, you know, our initial example. However, this is just better practice. The else allows you to not need to define a condition, and maybe once your conditions get more complicated, you know, you'll think you have all of your bases covered. You know, if you created two separate if statements, the else just it foolproofs it. If this is true, do this. If this is not true, do this. Simple. Very simple. Now, what if we had a situation where it wasn't just one or the other? It was maybe, well, it could be this, or it could be that, and then it could be this. So in other words, what if we have multiple things to check? Well, let's erase the else for a second. So let's say I really wanted to check if x was equal to 3. But I also wanted to check if x was maybe equal to 2. Maybe I also wanted to check if x was equal to 1. And I forgot my if. So you can use these else if statements to basically say, you know, expand on your conditions. Maybe you're checking for multiple things. It's not just one or the other. So in this situation, we're checking if it's equal to this. If it's not, then we're going to check if it's equal to this. And if it's not, we're going to check if it's equal to this. This is good programming practice because only one of these if statements could ever be activated. And I know what you're thinking. What's the difference between doing this? Because I see this all the time. Ignore the top example, for example. I see students do this all the time. They'll go if x equals 3, and then they'll make another if, and they'll make a third if. So they'll check if x is equal to 2, and they'll check if x is equal to 1. They don't use these else statements. Now, this probably will work in most cases, and that's why students will do it. But this opens you up to the possibility of two of these if statements or multiple if statements firing out when you probably only want one. So the difference here is only one of these situations will ever fire. As soon as one of these conditions is met, it doesn't even bother with the rest of the else's. It says, okay, we're performing this code, and we're not even checking this. Like, we're done. We found the condition. We're doing it. this might cause you some issues because it'll check this condition. Let's say x is equal to 3 and it performs some code. But then it will continue to check these conditions. And you know what? Maybe your conditions are perfect and maybe they're not complicated and maybe you've got it set up so that none of these will fire anyways. But there is the possibility that once this code is done, your condition might be set up where this code starts to fire off as well. And this is a very simple basic condition, so you probably wouldn't have to worry about that. But just keep that in mind. This is not really good practice. This is better practice. Unless you had a situation where you wanted multiple conditions to possibly fire off, then that's okay. And lastly, if this is not true, if this is not true, if this is not true, you can use the else as a default case so that this line of code will get activated. So if this is true, this code fires off, and then we're done. If none of these are true, that's where the else statement comes in, and this code will fire off. It's kind of like your default. It's kind of like your backup plan.